atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a common rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Can't hear me. Now you can hear me. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Kaiju Conversation Live. I'm your host, Elijah, and boy, am I frazzled. I just got out of work. I had to rush here to my office, but we are here. We are back at it again. Kaiju Conversation, episode 17. Kaiju Conversation Live, episode 17 to be exact. Man, what a season so far. We're starting to wrap up. We're over the hump of the middle of the year. We're now into August. We are 8 episodes in. There are 4 remaining. And boy, let me tell you, this episode's going to be a great one because my guest today, he is a man of my heart. Him and I talk so much. We agree on more than I think we should. This man does it all. He makes music. Amazing music. You've already heard some of it, and you haven't even known it, maybe. If you've seen the show, you have, because we credit him. He makes amazing music. He is a up-and-coming amateur, not amateur, because he knows more than me, because he went to school for this stuff. He is an amazing independent filmmaker. He has been so kind to let me help on one of his projects. He is a podcaster of many topics. He is one of the coolest cats I know, to be honest. So without further ado, allow me to introduce on to Kaiju Conversation episode 17, Kaiju Conversation Live. It is live. We are live, ladies and gentlemen, live from somebody's basement. It's Gratton Conwill.
What is this? I don't get it. I'm kidding. Don't think too hard about it. Wow. You know, it's taken you 16 episodes to get to the very, if your list of guests was, let's say, a barrel, then it's taken you 16 episodes to get to the bottom of that barrel where I am.
You're not bottom of the barrel. You're like peak.
Oh, come off it. What's good?
Oh, well, I've been busy. How have you been?
I've also been busy. I had to do a kind of long shift at work, and then I was under the impression that we were going to start this an hour from now, and so thankfully you texted me. Or I guess I kind of texted you. I was like, 1 hour to go.
And I was like 5 minutes.
Like, yeah, either.
It'll work.
Yeah, I got some kind of weird, I got like 3 lines on my hand today at work, and I don't know if it's a scratch or poison ivy or something, but it hurts. So there've been a lot of new developments today.
Sounds like it. I was busy sorting gum and mints. That took me an hour over of what I was supposed to get off.
Gum and mints. It's important to get those in order.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, man, where do we even start? It's the title of the episode is Giant Monster BS with Coast. So maybe we should start off with the thing that got us talking together, but not the thing that's kept us talking together with our shows. Everybody who's listening to this obviously knows Kaiju Conversation Live, but Giant Monster BS, the most listened to podcast in the country.
According to some sources, that's what they're saying, which is it's an honor. I mean, you and I, it's sort of, we can only communicate like this because if we were in the same room, it would pose too much of a threat. You know, if there was like a terrorist attack, because we are so powerful and influential in the world of giant monster podcasts that we can only communicate through the internet.
Yeah, the day that you and it'll be like the day that the Earth stood still. You know, if both of us are in the same room, the power is over 9,000.
We'll need a full security detail on that, because if one of us goes down, you know, the whole system is toppling down. It's going to be like a whole fight for power. You know, Matt is going to start heading a legion of podcasters to vie for power. It's going to be ugly. But right now we're at peace, and let's try to keep it that way.
Yes, yes. So, Gratton, for anybody who doesn't know about your show, I kind of want to take a couple of minutes here to really highlight something that I don't think the fandom has a lot of, and that's a podcast. And I'm saying this, I'm one of the podcasts that doesn't do this nearly as much as you, and so that's why I want to highlight it. Is you guys over there at Giant Monster BS Co. You guys both went to film school, so you have a very good understanding of how cameras work, cinematography, editing, the whole technical and to-do aspect of cinema. You guys know.
Maybe more than the average person. You know, film school is sort of what I like to call it to make myself feel better. We both went to college majoring in film. So we went to a college with a film program, not a great college, not a great film program, but nonetheless, we know the basics. We had some good instructors there, and more than anything, I think our ambition is sort of what led us to get where we are, which is not very far, but we know a thing or two. Now, I don't think for anybody who's not listening, if you listen to Giant Monster BS, that might not be the first thing that becomes apparent is a film knowledge. Might be an abrasiveness or a crassness, or a willingness to speak our minds. But beyond that, I'd like to think that we have at least a solid understanding of what makes a good movie, from more of a technical angle rather than, you know, subjective, emotional angle.
Yeah, and I do. I think you guys do a great job at, you know, having. Let's see, how do I want to? You guys at Giant Monster BS. One thing, there's not just one thing, but a couple of things I do appreciate. You guys, it's funny. Like you'll kick against the pricks. You'll go against the flow, and I mean, you and I both have similar opinions on most of the Monsterverse. My favorite opinion that you guys expressed was the Kong Skull Island review. How you guys, like, I wasn't aware nearly how much Kong Skull Island took from Apocalypse Now. And like that's something you guys taught me. And that was an interesting way to look at the film, a way that I never knew to look at it before. And you know, you have that stuff, and it's no surprise to anybody who watches Kaiju Conversation or listens to it that I'm not a fan of the Monsterverse, but you guys can have those opinions and introduce me to some new opinions. But then you also like talk very highly of Godzilla versus Destroya. And you know, I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but I know my co-host Rex was like, "This movie's hot dog water," and then hearing you guys talk so highly of it was very interesting. And that's kind of it's an emotional roller coaster. To listen to you guys talk about the variety of movies with your opinions, but then also, that's the Matt cameo right there. That's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
but also like introduce people to a bit of that craftsmanship, talking about the depth of field or the rule of thirds, um or was it Aperture? It was Aperture. I don't
Mhm.
remember on what movie, but you mentioned Aperture. And then like the next movie we covered, which was Super Legend Got Hikoza at the time, I was like,
It was White Balance.
White Balance,
It was
that's what
White
it
Balance, what we
was.
were talking about, yeah.
And then like on that movie, I was like, man, they didn't do anything here. Or they did too much, one of the two. It's overexposed and all this. And that's something I love about what you and Matt do is you look at it from almost a different perspective, but it's not an alien perspective. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, we come from, I would attribute this less to our film school, but we come from a background of as soon as we started hanging out in high school, what we would do is we would get on Amazon Prime and we would find the absolute worst looking, low budget, independent, like backyard filmmaking, handy cam movies. And our whole film education has come about from trying to avoid looking and feeling like that kind of movie. And so that has we've, kind of brute forced our way into understanding some things just to attempt to look more professional because that's really, um, that's why you would need an education like that is because you can get broad strokes. You can teach yourself composition. You can teach yourself rules like the 180-degree rule, whatever rule of thirds. You can teach yourself editing, but there's a lot of intricacies that really are what separates junk from art. And small stuff like lighting or sound, stuff that you really don't, when you're watching something, it just sort of passes by. You don't really think about it, but that stuff really is the difference. Um, so, to bring that back to Giant Monster BS, that's a lot of the subject matter of the podcast is talking about like, I really liked the deep focus in this shot, or I like the use of whatever, low angle, low shutter speed, whatever we're observing about whatever we're watching. It all comes from like we probably fixate on that more than uh the average person would. And I don't know if that's particularly interesting to listeners or monster movie fans, um, hence our ratings, but we like to talk about that stuff, and that's just our background. And we did notice when we were starting the podcast that the way that we talk about movies is not usually represented by other podcasts. We don't really hear people talking about them like that, especially monster movies, which is, a real niche. But yeah, you're right that we talk about more technical
Mm.
aspects of filmmaking.
And I think that that's actually a perfect segue into filmmaking. That's something that was really what got you and I talking more. We had interacted um sparingly before last year, but
Mhm.
last year, I was doing a short film, SOS Seek Shelter, and I think it was Michael Hamilton was like, Gratton's pretty good. Um, I think he had mentioned that you had done music for him, if I'm remembering correctly.
Um,
Somebody said that you did music. You and Matt. I'm sure. Was it you?
I don't
But
know because Matt has always done the music for everything we've done up until very recently. I've
Mhm.
started trying to make music, but it's always been Matt, and then I remember a few years ago, you reached out and I think you wanted some music made, and I was like, let me ask Matt about it. And Matt was like busy or something, and I was like, it was for your theme song, and I
It
was
was the
like,
theme song, yeah.
I was like, I think I can do it. I think what you're asking, Matt would do it much better, but I think I could get something that you'd be happy with. And then you asked me for your like YouTube channel. I think you have intro and outro music that I did. And then Seek Shelter, and then most recently Ed Okami, which was the most music I've ever made for you in one sitting, and probably the best music I've made to date.
Yeah. Somebody told me, because it was the theme song music. Somebody was like, Giant Monster BS, those guys do music. You should get with them. And so I did. And lo and behold, here 3 years? Was that in 2021? That sounds right.
At least 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, 3 years later, it's still used. We still love it. We added some vocals to it, but we love it. We love it.
That's fine. Yeah, I think I told you up front, I was like, I'm not singing. Like, you're not gonna get me to sing on this, but I'll make the music.
You don't want to say the line, "We don't do drugs, we don't do sex, the tokusatsu is where it's at."
As nice as that sounds, no.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, and then you did ET's. I think you did the intro first, then we did Seek Shelter, and then we did the outro. That sounds right to me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, all of that. I mean, your music's amazing. You do a lot of music on Giant Monster BS as well. Some really fun stuff. I enjoy.
I do every
listening
now
to
and
it.
then, but the intro and outro music is made by Matt, and I think it is one of the best. We've been using that for years and years now, but I still think it's some of the best as far as our little circle of the internet goes. I enjoy it. I guess I'm a little biased.
I enjoy it. I enjoy every time I listen to it. I was just listening to, I think the last thing that I listened to in full. I went back and I listened to it was Matt and Gratton on Inside Edition.
Oh, that's a good one.
That was the last thing I listened to. I think before that it was Destroya. I think.
Okay.
And then
I
was
didn't even know
listening
we
to
still had the Inside Edition thing up. I thought I took that down a while ago. But
now it's going to be taken down now that I told you.
I remember
no.
it being funny.
It's hilarious. I had to pause it a lot because I was editing an interview for Kaiju United, and I was listening to it. I was like, I can't focus on this interview right now. But yeah, no, I love it's a warm, fuzzy feeling hearing it. But all that to go back to the point, we started off working on, you would do music for me and whatnot, and then you learn that I want to be a filmmaker, an aspiring filmmaker, as I have in my Twitter X bio. But after SOS Seek Shelter, you and I started talking more, and little did I know that you as well had a love of filmmaking, and we really kind of hit it off from there. And we went down some cool rabbit holes of various subjects. You're one of the people that I know that, I mean, you love kaiju, but you also love cinema. You're not just a kaiju fan, and it's been really fun to talk to you about that stuff. and to really learn more about cinema as a medium from you through our conversations.
Yeah, that's sort of how I think about it, as like I'm fan of film first and then fan of Godzilla second, and under that is all the other great giant monsters. And I guess I think that kind of turns some people off of giant monster BS, if I had to guess, because we do many times let it be known. We'll use the phrase giant monster movie versus real movie. Well, if we really like a movie, and you hear us say the term like it's real movie good, or it's we some variation of that, we sort of grade on a curve, I guess, and we have this understanding that like monster movies, for a myriad of reasons, can carry camp or whatever. A lot of them were kind of cheaply made or rushed or whatever the reasons. And I'm not trying to disparage giant monster movies, but the movies that I spend most of my time watching are like really, really great works of art. And there are many, many that are out there, and many that I haven't seen, many that I've heard great things about. So, on our show, it's like, we'll concede like, this movie is really good, whether, like Destroya. We really liked that movie. Or, I'm trying to think of something else that we might have reviewed recently that we liked. Godzilla 2014 or something, or minus one even. Like minus one, we gave it or I think I might have given it like a 7 out of 10. I think for a lot of Godzilla fans, they would probably be like, what? Like, why not? And it's like, well, if I'm grading it on the scale that I would grade like a Clockwork Orange or something, it's like, obviously it's going to be down a few rungs. Like, it's just not as polished. But it's still really good. And that is sort of the whole conceit of our show, is like, we'll talk about movies and we'll get really in depth, and we like to appreciate the things that these movies are able to accomplish given some of the constraints that they've been faced with over the past, coming up on a century. And lost my train of thought. But we like movies, and we like giant monster movies slightly less.
So that actually goes into something that you and I can both kind of relate on. I'm a little more focused on my genre, I'm going to say with a question mark, of what I watch, because, as I started off as a Godzilla fan, growing up, I was a Godzilla fan. I watched every Godzilla movie. I loved Godzilla. I bought all the stuff. I still do. I watch every movie when it comes out multiple times in theaters, sometimes 30. I buy stuff every like every paycheck. Spend a little bit of money on Godzilla stuff. Yesterday I bought 3 Godzilla comic books. So, I still do that. But even more so than that now, I watch a ton of Japanese cinema. I've started watching Zatoichi. That's something I've mentioned on my show. I just finished Zatoichi and the Chess Expert, which is 13. There's 20. There's 26 in the original series, plus a remake, plus a spin-off, plus American remake, plus a stage show. So there's a total of 30 productions, we'll say. I do plan on watching all of them that I can. The only stuff I won't be able to watch, I believe, is the remake and the stage show. And that's it, I think. Actually, now that I say, I think. Yeah, that sounds right to me. But I also like I watch tokusatsu. You know, I consider myself more of a tokusatsu fan now than a Godzilla fan or a kaiju fan at that point. You know, I feel like I went from a Godzilla fan to a kaiju fan to a tokusatsu fan. Now I'm starting to become more of a Japanese cinema fan. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's kind of like that. I love Godzilla. I enjoy it. I watch it. I love kaiju. I enjoy it. I watch it. But I also want like there's more there's more to life than kaiju, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, you know, I like I said, I'm not as well versed as you, but I kind of feel the same way of like I watch more than just Godzilla. You know, I really highly value Godzilla and kaiju, but there's you know, in my top or top 10 films of all time, I think there's two Godzilla movies. You know, that's 1/5 of what I think are some of the greatest films of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's another kaiju movie in that list. I think so. I don't know. Maybe you have a different kind of outlook there.
I think where we kind of diverge is the tokusatsu stuff, which I really don't have too much of an interest in. It's taken me about, I don't know, 3 years to get halfway through the original series of Ultraman, which I'm loving. I do enjoy it when I watch it, but it's very much in the background of what I'm interested in. And you know, as far as like whatever Kamen Rider, you know, that stuff doesn't particularly interest me. And you know, I try not to be picky. I know we've talked about this a little bit, or I've told you this before, but I try not to be picky about where what I watch comes from,
Mhm.
because good movies come from everywhere.
Mhm.
But I have noticed, you know, especially in school, when our professors would start telling us to watch certain things, we would be assigned to whatever, watch, review stuff, that Japan does have one of the best film outputs of any country. You know, uh I'd say maybe South Korea has supplanted them in like modern day in terms of like just the drama coming out of there, but Japan still puts out great stuff. And it's like the US, uh France, South Korea, Japan, like, you know, they have high concentrations of good movies that come out, and especially throughout the history of like the past, you know, 80 years or so, Japan has a lot of, you know, great directors, beloved directors, and their influence has really been felt in Hollywood. Um so I do watch a fair bit of Japanese movies. You watch a lot more than me, I think. Although, you know, I try to restrict mine to stuff that's usually like kind of acclaimed, or something that I've heard, you know, has some significance. And you know, I'm not above watching bad movies, but I like to try to watch stuff that at least other people think is good. You know, to save myself some of the work. You know, if people have already sorted out like which ones are worthwhile, you know, that's a reason I think why people love the Criterion Collection, is they're kind of a great voice to listen to in terms of what you should watch. They've got a great collection of uh, films throughout film history, you know, silent era all the way up to modern movies. And so I've watched a fair bit of Japanese movies. As far as the podcast goes, you know, I have 2 podcasts. I wanted to do a third a while ago, but that's disappeared. But I have Giant Monster BS, which the goal is to review every giant monster movie ever made with some hard limits in place. No dinosaurs. Um, But then I have Only in Amityville, which is also me and Matt. Basically Giant Monster BS, but we talk about more broadly horror movies. It started out as only Amityville movies, but we got bored with that pretty quickly and reached out to horror, which has been really fun because that's, sort of like Giant Monster BS. Matt and I have been monster movie fans, Godzilla fans our whole lives. And then as we got older, we learned that there are a lot of sort of off-brand, C-tier kind of giant monster movies out there that we know exist, but don't particularly have any drive to go watch. And the podcast has kind of given us an excuse to like go out and seek out all these really small or, not really talked about movies. And same thing with Only in Amityville is I've watched horror. I like horror, but I'm not the biggest horror fan, and I don't know exactly what I'm talking about. So we've used that as sort of an excuse to explore some horror movies that maybe we've heard about or that people have talked about that we otherwise wouldn't have put any emphasis on seeing. But yeah, I try to watch cinema from all over the world.
Has there been in both shows together? Has there been anything that you were like, I don't know if this is going to be any good, but I guess I'll watch it, and you've watched it and you found out that it was actually really good?
There's been stuff, and I don't know if you want to go into this later. We could talk about the Heisei Godzilla movies, but that is a series of movies that I feel like a lot of people, it's very in vogue to put those movies down now, to sort of dismiss them. And I think that's just because they're not as flashy or exciting as Showa movies or the Millennium movies. But Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 was a movie that I never even considered. Like, I just thought that would be like a run-of-the-mill movie, and I've had it on several times. I've seen it sort of in the background, my eyes glazed over, not really paying attention to it. But when Matt and I sat down to watch that and review it for the podcast, we realized, like, and I don't want to say like this is a great movie, but we really enjoyed it. And it's so weird that, we watched that and then we went online, and the reaction to that movie is like people hate it. Like people are like, this is just a trash, worthless movie. And it's like, it's actually pretty good. Like the movies that come before and after, it's like, this is pretty good. Another one that comes to mind from the other podcast is The Golem. And I know you touched on The Golem a little bit when you were reviewing the Daimajin movies.
Mm-hmm.
But the original, or the oldest Golem movie that is not a lost film, which is The Golem, How He Came Into the World, I think. The third in Paul Wegner's Golem trilogy, but it's a prequel, chronologically the first. That's a cool movie. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of silent films, and I think a lot of people our age probably dismiss silent films altogether. And, when we were going to school for film, we were shown a lot of really boring silent films. And a lot of the ones like, they showed us Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and
Nosferatu?
Russian stuff. No, they didn't make us watch Nosferatu, but I still need to watch that. I have very little experience with silent films. I've watched a handful. I've seen Faust, I watched what was the one with what was the Swedish one that was like a Christmas Carol?
It's a Wonderful Life.
Victor Sjölström.
Oh my god.
That's the guy who directed and starred in it, Victor Sjölström. Anyway, I haven't seen
Carriage, the Ghost. What the fuck is it?
You can't cuss on this.
I'm sorry.
It was something like The Carriage or something. I don't know, but we watched that for Only in Amityville. But The Golem was far and above my favorite of the silent films that we watched. And it's got such an interesting history. What?
It does have an interesting history.
Little bit of anti-Semitism mixed in, but as far as sorry, cat hair. As far as that particular movie, the Golem is like considered to be one of like the first like cinematic horror icons. That is considered to be like the first film trilogy like ever. It's considered to be like one of the earliest like horror movies. It's a precursor to Frankenstein. It holds a lot of significance, that one movie, and I never hear anybody talk about it. That was one I never heard about in film school, never heard about Paul Wagner. And that watching that was like, wow, this is a classic. Like, this is great. And it's so weird that this is not as celebrated as we think it should be.
Yeah, because he wrote, directed, and starred in all three of those movies, which is quite a feat, especially when you can like. I mean, I've wrote and directed, and I've done a couple of acting roles in my own stuff, but like that's because I'm able to, and like I have to. But like when you think about back then, when if you made a movie, you had to have like some sort of backing because it was really expensive to make anything back then. That's pretty wild that he was able to achieve all of that.
Yeah. In the silent era, you'll see it's a lot more common than it is now to direct and star in. Like there were a lot of people like Victor Stjolstrom. I just talked about him. I wish I could remember the name of this movie. Let me look it up real quick. But it's what?
It's so famous.
It is so famous.
Well, everybody talks about
Let's see. We're getting this all live.
Hey, it's all live. We'll do it live.
Oh, the Phantom Carriage. That's it. But it was really common to see guys like them, Lumiere brothers, I think were in their own movies. Is that right? We have Matthew fact checking me, with his memory. Yes, but, that's something that you would see back then a lot is, directors, putting themselves in their own movies. Another one we watched was, why can I not remember any of these? The documentary one. No, the one we watched for Only in Amityville, horror movie. Weird. The hysterical woman.
The Man Who Laughs.
Matt's fact-checking memory is not worth a crap. Haxon, yes, thank you.
Okay.
I don't remember the guy who made that, but I remember that he showed up in the movie several times. And I'm bringing all of this up because Paul Wagner was in The Golem, and he did a good job. And it's also, that is sort of a microcosm for how it sort of forecasted how movie series would go too, because from what we understand, like the first was like, an adaptation of the Golem story, and then the second one was like a comedy. Like the second one was lighthearted, not supposed to be taken seriously, and then the third one was a prequel, which forecasted, like, that's a lot of what we see like today is we see franchises that go on and they'll get silly. They'll kind of stop caring. The budgets will fluctuate, and then sometimes they'll go back and want to do like a reset and they'll do a prequel. And to see all of that happening so early is just really interesting, because when I sort of think about silent movies as like, well, that's sort of back when they didn't know how to make movies, which is kind of true. It is completely true, but also they were figuring it out, and a lot of the stuff that they landed on is stuff that we're still landing on. We can get out of silent movies. I'm sorry, this has nothing to do with giant monsters.
I'm enjoying it. No, because another thing. So correct me if I'm wrong. So the Golem series, it's Der Golem, which is the Golem, the Golem, and is it the cheerleader?
It's something like that. I think they introduced a love interest for the golem,
Yeah, it's like
like an
it's
object of
something about a
affection.
cheerleader.
Yeah.
And then you have the Golem and how he came into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course that this all I wonder if the Golem was the first of this. It was the first franchise to have a foreign knockoff, because is it 1936? Was that when the Chev film The Golem came out? I think so.
I don't know. I'm only familiar with the original 3, and even then it's a little hazy.
And so, yeah, I think it's 36. I think 1936. That sounds right. That was when the Ches the Golem came out, or Le Golem as it was in its title. 1936, yes, which was then like the foreign knockoff,
Mm-hmm.
like how King Kong eventually had a ton of those, but you see foreign knockoffs all the time, and what's funny is the Golem is what ended up becoming, or Legolem is what ended up becoming Daimajin, which is yet another foreign remake of the Golem. I think that's all very interesting to see that kind of thing happen with the Golem franchise. And you are right, nobody really talks about those films or really acknowledges them, and it's really depressing to see that happen. When I think of the Golem, like, honestly, it is one of those legendary franchises. It's kind of sad that it's not hailed or regarded as well as, like, say, Nosferatu or the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which just got announced for a 4K release, by the way.
Didn't know that.
There's also another 4K release I'm going to mention, because I don't know if you know that this came out today.
Probably don't.
And so, there's those, and then of course we're talking silent films. We have to bring up the beginning of giant monster cinema, despite the fact that Giant Monster BS would refuse to acknowledge its existence, The Lost World.
I know nothing about that.
You know nothing about The Lost World? 1925?
No.
Lost World was Willis O'Brien's breakout film. That's where he showed his stop motion for the first time. That would lead to him trying to do Creation in the early 30s, which led to him doing King Kong. King Kong led to Son of Kong, and the rest is history, right? The Lost World also
was it a short?
No, it's a full-length film.
Okay, yeah, I have not heard of it.
It's an adaptation of is Edgar Rice Burroughs The Lost World? No, I don't think it's Edgar Rice Burroughs. That's the land that time forgot. The Lost World was a adaptation.
Arthur Conan Doyle?
Yes, Arthur Conan Doyle. Adaptation of that story, and the very end. Yes, Rex in the chat. Hello, Rex. Hello, welcome to the show. Arthur Conan Doyle. The Lost World also features the first ever monster rampage sequence as a brontosaurus destroys downtown London. It would be... I've tried to watch it, and this is where I'm going to have to admit some of my faults. The Lost World is the only silent film that I've attempted to watch in my lifetime. And I fell asleep and did not watch it.
They're very easy to fall asleep to.
Yeah, there's just something about them that's just comfy to fall asleep to. Black and white and just like music or like noise like makes me fall asleep. It's just something that happens. I used to use Ultra Q as a way to fall asleep some nights.
I saw the Phantom of the Opera. Now I'm sure there's multiple versions of that were silent. I'm not a film historian, but I saw that in college, and they had a live. They had a pianist playing to the whole. It was like a real screening where there was a guy at a piano. What? Yeah, Matt wants me to make the distinction that it was an organ, not a piano. Either way, it was really fun, and it's a really engaging way to watch those kinds of movies, and it's those are just different kinds of movies. I've heard you say on your show that seeing giant monster movies in theaters, like the old Showa movies, gave you a different perspective as to, you know, like those were really intended to be seen in theaters. Similar with silent films, they were intended to have a live component, that being the music. And so seeing them, and they're always they're restored in like kind of a surgical way. You know, a lot of silent films have like lost segments, and they'll switch to like different prints of the movie because some portions were only available in certain formats. And there's a lot of like prefaces, like Kino Lorber will do that, where they'll say like, just letting you know, this section is going to be like this, or, you know, whatever. We have music that we think was intended to go with the movie, but we can't know for sure. But either way, here it is. And it's all presented in a really clinical way that I think is maybe a little antithetical to the way that the movies were intended to be experienced. And I think that has contributed to this modern perception that people our age have of silent films. It's like, well, we don't need those. Like, they're old, like, you know, da 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 dun da dun da dun da 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 da. It's like nobody wants to watch that. Which has really sucked, because there are a lot of great silent movies like Faust, like The Golem, that I don't hear people talking about. There are great silent films that I do hear people talk about. Metropolis is one. People always swear by Metropolis, and it is good. I watched Metropolis, and I was like, it's probably not going to be that good, but it was. Yeah, I would say give silent movies another shot whenever you're ready.
I know I own one that is called here we go again, you know. I admittedly I do want to watch. I need to watch more vampire movies. I really want to watch Nosferatu. I really want to watch The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Those are like high on my list. But one that I really want to watch that is available is one of the only remaining Japanese films from pre-war Japan, which is called A Page into Madness from 1925. It was I believe it was the first production that Eiji Tsuburaya worked on. I could be wrong there, but it was one of his earliest ones. So that's a film that I'm really interested in watching. I own it. I have the Blu-ray. I haven't watched it. I do want to, but it's like an hour and like 40 minutes. It's really long for a silent film, at least in my opinion. So yeah, no, there's a lot of silent films. I know one thing that I've always thought about is Steven Spielberg, when being asked like, "Hey, how did you get into cinema, and like how did you research?" And he was like, "I watch silent movies. You know, I that's what I grew up with, was watching silent films." And watching silent films helped me understand and have an appreciation for music. See John Williams in all of Spielberg's films, and an understanding for how to show and not tell. And I really wish I could build that interest to see his perspective there, because I think that's something that's very important for cinema and filmmaking and storytelling, is showing, not telling. Especially in the medium of cinema.
Yeah. The way that, you know, the filmmakers of that era, like Spielberg and Coppola or whatever, their introduction to film was very genuine, and they're people who really, really loved all kinds of film. I think there's a story about I can't remember which movie it was, but there's a story about Steven Spielberg sneaking onto set of a Hitchcock movie, and I think he got kicked out.
Mhm.
Big Hitchcock fan. Spielberg is.
Will
And
be.
yeah, but those guys, I feel like they have such a genuine love for movies and the history, like the long history of movies. Scorsese, especially, he's probably the pinnacle of like just movie watching machine.
Mhm.
And I worry about the modern crop, you know, us included, because you had the silent era and like the golden age of Hollywood, where I think a lot of people look back on those as like, those are so rudimentary. Why would we even revisit those? Like normal people, not, you know, obviously film fans are going to see the worth in those, but people don't even give them the time of day. But those are the building blocks that all of the great directors who are like, you know, now at the end of their lives, they built on top of all of that, you know, watching all of that. And what we grew up watching was stuff that those guys did, you know, the big fun stuff like Indiana Jones and Star Wars. And I think that is becoming like really painfully obvious. Um and you know, not to say that like movies are bad now, because I think movies now are as good as they've ever been. You know, I think we have good ones and bad ones, and that will always be the case. But the big filmmakers today are just kind of Spielberg fanboys, you know.
Mhm.
They're fans of Star Wars, and you know, I don't know, just a little too into pop culture and not enough into the actual like construction of film and why movies work. I don't know what I'm talking about, but
No, you're right.
I do kind of worry about where that's leading us sometimes. You know, but then I think, you know, we've always had like brain dead movies. We've always had movies made by people who have no idea what they're doing, people who shouldn't be doing it. There have always been movies that are like overhyped or overpraised for what they are. So it's really, that's not exclusive to now. And I don't want anybody to get the impression that I'm like, movies are bad now when they were good, when they were old. Um, because in a lot of respects, there are a lot of, I mean, there's now more avenues for great filmmakers to be great filmmakers than ever before. Um, but I think the ratio of junk to art is about as much as it's always been.
I think actually, and I would love if Rex would be able to come on here. I don't know if he'll be able to. Um,
Come on.
there is something interesting to bring up. So, Alien Romulus, I think, is a good example of that. Just came out from Rex has seen it. Rex has seen it. He's left a review on Letterboxd. He's given me his overall thoughts. The film is more of a fan film. It's obvious that the director loves the Alien franchise, but it's also obvious that the director loves the Alien franchise. Um, with references and callbacks and a lacking of building upon what is there and more celebrating. Oh my God, Romulus Rex, you want if you come on here, you got the link. You can come on here and talk and join in on the fun. Um, but that is something that that's Godzilla King of the Monsters, Godzilla versus Kong, Godzilla Kong the New Empire,
Mm-hmm.
and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I could continue listing off films and sequels and prequels and remakes and whatnot, but there's a lack of building upon what is here. Um, and I think that is a legitimate worry, a legitimate concern, because we don't have films like Jaws anymore. Um, and when we do, they're not successful, and it's not necessarily all a artist problem as much as it could also be an audience issue. audiences love going to Deadpool and Wolverine and seeing
Things they've seen a
characters.
million times already.
Yeah, and characters. Oh my God! Hold on, just a second. Is this?
Hello.
Oh,
You brought up
Nice.
Alien Romulus, and yeah, I couldn't resist. No face cam because I look terrible right now, but it's fine. Yeah. Oh, you go ahead first.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, from what I heard of your conversation, I think, Gratton, you make an interesting point about like sort of the direction Hollywood is going in, and how, like, yeah, awful, dumb, brain dead movies have always existed. But I feel like what's concerning to me is how modern audiences seem to be very accepting of it, more so than like previous decades. At least to me, that's how it seems like. Because so far, I've seen like Alien Romulus, a lot of praise, Deadpool and Wolverine. Audience love it. It's like the return of the MCU. But to me, I feel like both of those films are like some of the most emblematic of my issues with like modern Hollywood.
Yeah. I would agree. I'm trying not to openly trash movies, but I will. It is worrying how people are embracing this stuff, but the way that I have to think about it is like it's all a matter of time. I think before people sort of realize, or I saw a Letterboxd review for Deadpool versus Wolverine the other day. That was something I hadn't even considered, where they said like, imagine being like 15 years old and watching this in like 20 years and trying to understand any of what's going on. You can't, because it's all built on you having an understanding of like early 2000s to like, mid 2010s pop
Right.
culture. And that's just going to be gone. And so it really is, they're just building this tower that's going to come crumbling down. I mean, you think back to, people liked Roger Corman movies too, which I like and appreciate Roger Corman. We talked about him pretty extensively in the last season we did of Only in Amityville. But he had kind of a scummy business practice of like, making movies basically to put posters up, like they were all really cheap. It was, basically bait and switch. He knew he was making trash movies because people would go see them. Now, as far as critical response, I think, there is the argument to be made that it's worse now. But it is, it's all kind of an echo chamber is what I'm observing.
Right.
Elijah brought up, the recent MonsterVerse movies and stuff, and it's all what it is. They are fan films, and they're calling back. I remember watching Kong Skull Island, and Sam Jackson says like, "Hold on to your butts," and it's like, why are we referencing Jurassic Park? What does this have to do? It's not furthering this, and like, everybody's seen Jurassic Park, so it's not like you're referencing some like piece of literature that was like the framework for what you're trying to do. It's like, no, you're just doing like a very surface level pop culture reference in the hopes that people watching it right now will understand that. And that really is what is worrying me, because that's becoming more and more the impetus for people making movies. And I'm sorry that I'm taking this in such a, I don't mean for this to be a derogatory, we're supposed to have fun, but, it does kind of worry me, and it kind of irritates me that, big budget movies now are just kind of fan films, and we don't seem to reward the effort that some directors put in when they're not just trying to do that. And I don't know. There's nothing we can do about it, I guess, except spend your money wisely. Elijah, you got to stop seeing movies like Twister. Come on.
Well, actually, that's a great example. Another film, like, it started off very original, it was different than the original, And then by the middle part of the film, like they're joking about the suck zone, and this is the largest tornado we've ever seen. We need to launch Dorothy too, and it's like
I've never seen
already-
Twister, so I don't know what half of that meant.
it's
Me
okay.
neither, but
But that's all stuff from the first film, and it's just doing it in the modern day. And
Right.
I love that thought. I've never thought about this. The fact that in 50 years from now, when we're looking back, Jaws is the first Hollywood blockbuster. What was before Jaws? The Godfather. Those are the two like beginning of modern Hollywood, essentially. The Godfather, Jaws, Star Wars, the trilogy of blockbuster cinema, early blockbuster cinema.
Birth of a Nation.
There you go.
We don't want to talk about that when we're talking about blockbusters, do we?
Oh boy.
There is a bunch of interesting things to look at that. There was a lot of new ideas being thrown around there. Jaws and Star Wars were pushing special effects. I just read today Ridley Scott like full stopped a project after seeing Star Wars and was like, I'm gonna do Alien. And then you have Alien.
After being depressed for about 3 months, apparently.
And before Alien, like you can look at that and it goes back to like Dark Star, which was Dan O'Bannon and Shusett first movie with who was it that directed that? It was
John Carpenter.
John Carpenter. And then look at John Carpenter. Then he went to do Halloween and whatnot. So there's an interesting concept there. There's a lot of building blocks there in the late 60s to 70s for Hollywood. And then, look at today and it's like, well, if you want to watch Deadpool and Wolverine, you have to understand the Blade trilogy, the Daredevil duology, the fact that there's a canceled Gambit movie, 3 Deadpool films prior to Deadpool and Wolverine, an entire X-Men franchise with 3 alternate realities, and the MCU. And then with that, you have to watch 5 Spider-Man movies and oh God, what else is there? And Fantastic Four movies.
Fantastic
and
Four.
It's like at that rate, it's like what not many people are going to go watch 25 Zatoichi movies. What makes you think in 50 years from now, somebody's going to go watch 70 superhero films?
Right.
It's interesting that you brought up like Jaws and Star Wars as examples because, those were, for all intents and purposes, like if you're watching those, as a young adult, at 13 years old, you're not going to see the deep connections that they have to like older cinema or foreign cinema, but they do. Jaws has its roots in suspense. Spielberg was a huge Hitchcock fan, is a huge Hitchcock fan, and always will be.
Will be.
But George Lucas took influence from Kurosawa movies. Now, the difference is that they're using the framework of those stories to create something new. George Lucas didn't say we're making the Hidden Fortress 2. Spielberg didn't say we're going to make Psycho 5 or whatever. They're using like basic components of John Carpenter's another example. I watched the original Thing from Another World from the 50s the other day for the first time. I was like, wow, that's great. And it's completely understandable why somebody like John Carpenter would see something in that and want to try something. I guess that's kind of counterintuitive to my point because that is kind of a remake. But, when he made Halloween, that was also, Psycho was a huge influence on that.
I mean, with that point of like the Thing, at least John Carpenter it's a very different version of that story.
Yes.
And the monster is completely different. Whereas you watch something like, say, Alien Romulus, and largely it's doing the exact same thing as the previous movies with like one or two scenes of something kind of new, and another thing that is just a variant of things we've seen before.
Mm-hmm. In terms of like big franchise stuff like that, I always catch myself thinking, you know, because I guess in theory there is a very good version of Alien Romulus that didn't get made. You know, somebody out there had a great idea for another Alien movie that will never see the light of day.
Neil Blanc.
Clearly not.
Yeah.
Clearly not
It was
today.
coming.
Sorry.
Because so many of his movies have been great. You know, Chappie was an all-time classic. I'm sure he would have brought Alien back to life. But big franchises like that, you know, the artistry, I don't want to condemn the artistry, because it's like, well, if you're brought on to direct Alien Romulus, it's like, you know, that's not where I would choose to try to make my opus, I guess. So I kind of forgive him, you know, or forgive whoever makes these movies. You know, talk about the MonsterVerse movies if you want. Because to an extent it is like they're hired on to do this. And then, you know, if you look at like the stuff that Michael Dougherty's directed that's like original, or Adam Wingard, it's like that's the stuff that people want to see. You know, The Guest or whatever, You're Next. You know, like that's the stuff that is like, you know, when that director's work is resonating with people, it's that. It's not the 40th Godzilla movie that he, you know, wanted to put a Tide Pod joke in. You know, that's not the stuff that's going to stick with him.
You know, I think I'm speaking more from a personal standpoint here, but I've said this multiple times before, and I'll continue to say it. For me, like making a Godzilla movie specifically, you know, that's a franchise you take Godzilla out of my life, you don't have me, pretty much, you know. There is a very slim window of what I would do and how I could make a Godzilla movie. And I don't even know what that is yet. Like, that is something I could not do. As a fan, there is no way I could create something that I felt was worth building upon and pushing forward such a franchise. And I think that's an issue that we see a lot of, is people taking these projects on thinking, oh, I'm going to make the next, you know, I love Godzilla, I love Alien, I love Marvel, you know. It's like, I'm going to push the genre forward, and all it really does is just take what you've seen before and regurgitate it in a slightly different outlook.
Nostalgia porn. That's what it is. That's what Romulus was. And Deadpool and Wolverine. And I don't know, it's kind of, just to me, it is very, I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself, but it's very concerning just seeing people eat that up and being like, yes, this is what we want. This is what movies should be like. Where, like, we don't want challenging movies anymore. Like, say like something like The Last Jedi, say what you will about it, love it or hate it, it did something different. It wanted to push that story forward, and succeed or fail, I don't think the next movie that tried to backtrack on everything really succeeded in course correcting that franchise.
Exactly. That's what I mean when I say that, like, directors trying to do stuff are really not being rewarded. But I mean, you take I think what Gareth Edwards did with Godzilla was really great. And I think it would have been even better had he done more. But what seems to be resonating with people more is just like mindless noise. You know, Adam Wingard, if he had a free schedule, he could direct the next 20 MonsterVerse movies, and I'm sure they'd all make money. I have no idea. I don't know how those movies are making money, but they are. And the directors trying to do new stuff with that are not being rewarded. But it's not, I don't mean to sound pessimistic, because, you know, a movie like Long Legs is doing really well right now, which I haven't seen.
Long legs.
It does. But original stuff is also doing well. You know,
Right.
Ryan Johnson did Knives Out after Star Wars. Great movie. I don't know if you feel the same way, but a lot of
I
people
haven't
like
seen
that
it.
movie. Knives Out is great. Not crazy that it started its own franchise, but at the time, Knives Out came out and it was getting great reviews, and it was really interesting. You know, it's like, well, everybody seems to love the work that this director's doing, but not when it's attached to Darth Vader. You know, I wonder what the problem is there. But yeah, I think, yeah, nostalgia porn is a good name for it.
And-
I've also
and-
heard irony poisoning is a term that I think applies to a lot of movies coming out now.
Mm.
Another good example, I think, is a Quiet Place. You know, that was a movie that, like, it's not really. I mean, we've seen stuff like that before, but like it went somewhere different. It tried something different. It was a silent movie for the most part. You know, um, a movie without dialogue until the final act. That's something you don't see because audiences have to be told. Not shown a lot of times, right? And the fact that here we had a film that did not do that, and it showed you and not told you was something different, and it did very well. Um, that I think of that as another one. Knives Out, Quiet Place, Parasite. That's another good one.
Pacific Rim.
Civic Rim. And Guillermo del Toro, I think, is a good example of somebody who tries to do something different, or at least puts his own spin on it. He made 2 superhero movies, but the thing about the Hellboy duology is it sticks out among its peers because of the Guillermo del Toro touch.
Right.
And that's something I think it goes. Part of it is who's making it. Edwards very clearly made Godzilla 2014. There is some meddling there, but it's undoubtedly a Gareth Edwards film.
Mhm.
Godzilla versus Kong looks like it could have been done by anybody.
Yeah, and was
Pretty
it was
much.
done by anybody?
And yeah,
Done
and
by
that,
the studio.
and that's something I think is very interesting about especially modern day filmmaking is but I mean, I think that's something, every 50s B movie about a radiated monster, it's not really unique. The things that stick out in those movies are mostly the ideas, the idea of a rock creature that grows and then breaks and then it grows again and then breaks, and that's how it attacks you. Or an alien giant bird bigger than a battleship. That stuff was unique. They went with the outlandish ideas to create something that's why it's memorable. The movie's not memorable, the ideas are. But, and I think, Rex, you and I were talking about this the other day. Now, especially in modern Hollywood, it's
Sorry. Sorry about that.
Godzilla.
I'm not gonna explain that.
Godzilla in especially Godzilla, but also in films like Alien Romulus, there seems to be a sudden change instead of telling a director what you can and can't do, it's what can I tell the writer? What are we going to do in the writer's room? How are we going to create a product that people want? Not necessarily how can we make a product, it's how can we create a product.
I mean, another thing that's bothered me too, and like outside of like the nostalgia porn of like Deadpool, Wolverine, and Alien Romulus, I think the thing that really stuck out to me with both films is that it feels like neither of them strive to be anything more than what's on the cover. Like in Deadpool and Wolverine's case, there's like a promotional video where Ryan Reynolds is like yeah, this is just a shallow, fun watch that you can watch with friends and stuff. There's no deeper meaning here, nothing to it. This is just gratuitous fan service, the movie. And it's like you don't have to be like, I don't know, Citizen Kane or something like that, but why not strive for more? Deadpool and Wolverine, I feel like in particular, is like there is an opportunity there for some meta commentary with the state of Disney, the multiversal like superhero films, and all that sort of nostalgia porn. Like there's a very clear opportunity there to me to really satirize that and say something about it. But it just doesn't want to do that. It's just the most straightforward approach to that.
Yeah, I was talking to Matt the other day about my philosophy is just like audiences don't know what they want until somebody gives it to them.
Right.
And I've been thinking a lot about Everything Everywhere All at Once is like a great example of that. Because that in itself almost satirizes the current state of like multiverse superhero movies. By it's like, instead of doing a crossover between billion-dollar characters, it's just like, it's a mom and dad, yes. Like they're getting their daughter back, dude. Yeah. Like reacting to that, like you're seeing Iron Man for the 80th time. It's like they're doing laundry. But that's, I think the biggest difference is maybe writing. Something a more recent interaction that Elijah and I had was doing the Giant Monster BS episode about Takeshi Kimura, or Kaoru Mabuchi, if you want to be more accurate. But that's just something I've really had a growing appreciation for is the impact that writers can leave on a movie. Like I said, I watched The Thing from Another World the other day, and I was like, this is good. Like it was kind of confusing because it has the look and feel of something not too dissimilar from The Giant Claw or something, where it's like, this is a 50s B movie solidly. The effects aren't too great. The staging is sort of plain. These actors are okay, but it's all run of the mill, but the dialogue is really good. And like the way that like characters end up finding themselves like kind of in tense situations, it's all a result of the writing. And I was like, who wrote this? Like, what else did he write? And one of the things that immediately stood out, he wrote His Girl Friday, which is like a screwball comedy with Cary Grant that's very like dialogue heavy, like dialogue driven. And I've only seen a little bit of it, but I know, the kind of genre and the kind of movies that Cary Grant was doing at that time are very like a mile a minute dialogue. People are like talking over each other and interrupting each other, and it's all moving really fast because the dialogue is driving it. And that was something that really kind of surprised me, is just the idea that like you can take a really, really talented writer and put them in a genre, and really without doing a whole lot new, they can make it work. It's another thing I think people attribute a lot of the success to Psycho, which that also had great acting and direction, but the writing was really good for a movie like that, a black and white slasher movie. Like it had a really, really engaging story, and it moved like a Hitchcock movie, and there was great suspense, but of course the things that directors nowadays, I think, would remember most about that movie is not the writing, but it's the dead mom jump scare or the music or the shower scene, really superficial details,
Right.
without understanding all of the very intricate mechanics that were crafted by like really, really, really talented people that made that work. You can't just do, the case in point, they tried to remake Psycho in the 90s and it sucked, because you just can't do it like that. but
Right.
writers are
And then
really
that's something. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's something I kind of noticed in like Alien Romulus. I'm sorry to bring it up again, but
keep us on topic, Rex.
but in Alien Romulus, there's pretty much from the halfway point in the movie, it's references to various alien movies every 5 minutes. And it comes to the point where the movie is referencing scene transitions from aliens, scene transitions that have actual thematic purpose and intent in their usage. Whereas in this film, it's just fan service. It's just remember when Ripley's face dissolved into the earth? And that's all it is. It's just superficial.
Yeah, it's very rare when a sequel can actually like pull something like that off and have it mean anything. I don't know if you guys are Blade Runner fans. But that was something that I really appreciated about Blade Runner 2049. It's like that's a movie that should have been really bad, probably. Especially with Ridley Scott, at some point being attached to direct. Train crash. But it turned out really, really great. Because Denis Villeneuve is one of the greatest working directors, at least greatest working directors who's touching big IP,
big blockbusters, yeah.
or Dune. And he's got a pretty good filmography of just original stuff too. And it's impressive when somebody like that is able to like wrangle it and also, make big stuff like that meaningful. I don't think it's a hot take to say that the new Dune movies are pretty good. That's been exciting for me to see, movies like that celebrated pretty universally. Those movies are making a lot of money and the guy making them is trying really hard and saying a lot new and doing a lot of new stuff as a really distinct voice. So that's been nice to see him be celebrated because he's done basically nothing but great movies the past 10 years or so.
Right.
Dune especially, I do think Dune will go down as like if you're looking at films that will impact future generations, I feel like Dune is one of those that's like
Oh, it's a modern classic, probably.
Yeah.
in the making.
And I think that's important to bring up that I think, I personally believe in 30 years from now, we're not going to be talking about Avengers Endgame. We'll be talking about Dune and Dune Part 2 and Dune Messiah.
I mean, Avengers Endgame, I feel like just the cultural impact of its time will be what it's remembered for more than the actual content.
Was the year before COVID. All the superheroes were running around ready to fight a big purple guy. What they didn't realize is their franchise would die a year later.
Now, how does that compare to Alien Romulus, Rex?
Oh boy.
But an Alien Romulus, they should. I haven't seen it, but I think it's fair to say they could have used a few more Avengers references in Alien Romulus.
Oh yeah. No, I was waiting for Iron Man, Doctor Doom to show up and marry a xenomorph or something.
So,
go ahead.
I was going to see if you wanted to transition here. Actually, I hinted at something that was announced today, and Gratton, we're going to get your live reaction.
Okay.
You were talking about the Criterion Collection. I brought up 4K's announced today. How would you
as long
like
as it's not another James Cameron 4K.
How would you like to own the original Godzilla movie in 4K?
I could take it or leave it.
What if I told you November 19th, the Criterion Collection's putting out Godzilla 54 in 4K?
I'd say it's about time.
Literally.
And Seven Samurai.
And probably
That's
more
about time,
Kurosawa
too.
films,
Hopefully.
because those are coming out here for me. So
They need
I'm sure
to
you guys will get them.
they need to re-release the ones they have only on DVD. That's what I want to see.
Mm.
Yes, I'm excited. I'm sorry, I didn't. You're anticipating a reaction that never came. That is exciting. That is really exciting. I'm thinking about all the implications. It's the first Japanese Godzilla released in 4K in the States, barring -1, I guess.
It'll end up being the second, since -1's supposed to ship in September with
Mhm.
the exclusive. Oh, by the way, I don't know if we established this, if we've mentioned this. I think it's confirmed that the bonus Blu-ray on the US releases is the bonus features, probably subtitled. So the only reason
For
to get,
That would
-1?
be funny.
yeah, the only thing that the -1 Godzilla Store exclusive is going to have is the minus color on it.
The other ones don't have that? I thought they did.
Correct. They don't have minus color.
Okay.
That's the stipulation, is you get the dub and the bonus features probably subbed on the standard releases, 4K and Blu-ray releases. But on
I mean, it is Toho, so you're putting a lot of faith in them bothering to sub the bonus features.
I think they will for the wide release, because
But not for the
Possibly.
Godzilla Store
I
exclusive?
think they rushed the Godzilla Store exclusive to just have it out there.
They're
I hope
rushing it
Toho.
so
I love
fast, you know.
Scott.
It's still a month away, but they're going so fast to get it out. Yeah, I've got a lot of opinions about some physical media stuff going on. We don't have to get into it, but yeah, Godzilla on 4K, exciting. Seven Samurai on 4K, also very exciting.
See, I feel like I should have been excited for the Kurosawa announcement, Seven Samurai, but
Mhm.
I was like, Godzilla? Oh my! Oh, and Shape of Water also got announced for 4K.
Oh, nice.
That's been on
I
4K,
didn't know it didn't have one.
but I guess Criterion got it.
Yes.
Okay.
So this
I mean,
makes
wouldn't that be an upscale?
What?
probably.
Because that was from like 2017, so it probably would have been mastered in 1080p.
Maybe they remastered it in 4K.
I don't know. I got the 4K basically as soon as it came out, the whatever standard release. But I guess I'm not like, I wouldn't know. I'm not like a pixel perfect guy. I'm not looking for that kind of stuff.
You're not
Although
interested in grain, what's the
detail
term?
or grain structure.
Yeah, you're not interested in grain structure. You're not one of those people on the internet that calculates grain structure on remasters.
I have 1,000% more respect for people who care about grain structure than I do for James Cameron. No irony, like no sarcasm. I really do. Like James Cameron he can go. I really, 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 really don't like James Cameron. I'm also sick of rich people using the phrase like "get out of your mom's basement." It's like, where do they think we're living?
Well, this does say at the bottom of the screen right now, in live from somebody's basement.
My dad's basement. But also like that's like, I don't know, to me that's like the most generic insult. It's like you're not addressing the problem, James Cameron.
Right.
You're just showing how out of touch you are continually.
He's too busy making Avatar 1 through 5.
I know. I was saying maybe I shouldn't say this on the stream. I won't say it. Yeah, maybe he should have made Alien Romulus.
A
AI
Cameron,
upscaled all
maybe
the
it would have been better
pixels.
than maybe it would have been better than what we got at least.
would-
I don't know.
it would have been just like The Abyss, but with Alien.
I've never seen The Abyss, so I can't comment.
It's pretty forgettable. Honestly, I
I
don't
see.
remember anything about The Abyss.
Nice.
Maybe it'll be like
All I know
True
about
Lies.
it is the CGI.
So, Gratton, you said you had a topic.
Did I? So, you just are about to hit 100 episodes. I don't know when that episode's coming out. But we also reached a sort of milestone that we have ended season 1 and we are starting season 2 this month, which I don't think I've announced anywhere. But we could talk about that if you want, because that's sort of where my head's been recently, is this season I've been working on, where a lot of things are changing about my show. It's going to become a lot more structured, at least in the short term. And I don't know, do you want me to talk about that, or?
Yeah, let's talk about it. So, first, I'm going to ask you,
Mhm.
what's it like transitioning from, like, going to a new benchmark? That benchmark, that milestone. For us, it's going to be episode 100 soon. For you, it's moving from season 1 to season 2.
Looking back on it, I was kind of trying to get us caught up to the modern age of giant monster movies before we moved on. And, we did that successfully. We've reviewed we've reviewed the entire Godzilla franchise with the exception of the anime movies, which we'll get to later. But live action stuff, we've reviewed all of it. And all of the big franchises we've reviewed, everything Mothra, as far as feature films go, everything King Kong, and we've been caught up. We did Ultraman, Shin Ultraman, and Ultraman Rising, and with that, after Ultraman Rising, we're kind of caught up in terms of the really big giant monster stuff, and so I thought that was a good place to end season 1. And transition to this season. It's weird because it's technically what we've been doing is like everything since we started almost 6 years ago at this point has been technically season 1. So we've experienced a lot of change through that season just by virtue of it being everything we've done before. And originally we were going to do 100 episodes and then roll over to season 2. But I really wanted to get us caught up because we were already on that trajectory. We've been pacing ourselves since we started to now, reviewing like the big stuff, Godzilla, Gamera. Now we're caught up. And now I want to kind of go back, and what we're really going to do is like a deep dive of the break between Godzilla films that birthed the independent giant monster genre in Japan, and sort of branched off into its own thing that's now still continuing with, directors like Shinpei Hayashiya and Minoru Kawasaki. So how it felt, it was sort of like, well, it's about time. It took us a long time to review movies. We don't do research like you guys, so for us it's just a matter of sitting down, watching the movie together, and then talking about it. And by that metric, we've been very slow. So it was kind of a relief. And now looking back on it, it's like a little strange to me that I chose to end it on Ultraman Rising out of I could have just bookended it with Godzilla movies, but the order we went in left off with Ultraman Rising. So it's a little funny. I guess it's fitting for what we're doing. So I guess I don't know if I say I feel accomplished at all. I think it's just I think the big accomplishment is going to be season 2, which is going to be a lot more well produced than the previous stuff, in that we'll go in a little more informed.
Okay. So I think it's interesting that you're transitioning when you transition here from season 1 to season 2. It's more, it's not the mainline stuff. I think that's also something that we're seeing in the fandom a little bit, is going from like the Godzilla, the Gameras and whatnot, to the more outlandish and more creative films. I say that, all the Godzilla films and whatnot, the mainstream stuff is still creative, but A Godzilla movie just isn't a Minoru Kawasaki film.
For
They're
better
not
or
the
worse.
same. Yeah, for better and for worse. They're they're not the same. And I think that's very interesting to take note of and to see the progression of your show go. And that's something I think you mentioned at the beginning of this stream, how when you started getting into movies, you and Matt would just hop on Amazon Prime and watch the worst movie you could find, the worst background film,
Mhm.
like backyard film, like a Conga TNT of sorts,
Mm-hmm.
And now that's where the show's going, almost like you're going, like returning to your roots of watching films. And I think that's kind of interesting.
That is an interesting way to look at it. We also, Matt and I just generally watch giant monster movies when we started hanging out. So we've always sort of stayed true to that. And I think a big part of the show is also experiencing the movies together. Because a lot of people like you guys, you record remotely. I've had the luxury of actually being able to record every single episode so far in the same room with Matt. We've watched all the movies together, sitting on a couch. And so there's been sort of this organic environment that we've created all of this in. And then, maybe it would have been wiser to pace ourselves out and have, still be working on Godzilla movies throughout the next, I think we have about over 100 movies left to go for the whole series. The goal is to review every giant monster movie ever made. And there will continue to be giant monster movies made, probably, most likely. So beyond that goal, our second goal is to continue forever. And so, it just worked out the way our schedule panned out is that we did all the big stuff kind of first, and then we're going to go back and do some other big stuff in like season 3. The Daimajin movies are one that we're going to go, back and do, and that's not, I'm looking at my list here. Sorry. So yeah, we're gonna do stuff like the Mysterians, Gorath. We're gonna watch Tremors, which is sort of pushing our giant monster thing, but we both agreed we want to watch that. Dogura. We're gonna watch the Godzilla anime movies. Daigoro versus Goliath. We're still gonna be watching stuff that is more mainstream than the stuff we're talking about in season 2, but something that you guys have sort of done with your shows, you've really dug into certain behind the scenes stuff going on between the movies that you're reviewing and sort of applying a narrative to like the making of these movies, that like certain things behind the scenes are resulting in what we're seeing on screen. And I like that a lot. And you guys have reviewed several Minoru Kawasaki movies. You've reviewed Death Kappa. You've referenced Raiga. Those are all movies we're going to be reviewing in season 2. And what I think is nice about this narrative, we're not going to be sticking strictly to Japanese stuff, but for the most part, it is Japanese stuff, because this is a genre that sprang up, the independent stuff that sprang up in Japan. And we didn't get that, after Final Wars, a new genre was kind of created. Independent or like parody level kaiju movies, and there is a narrative there, with people like Shinpei Hayashiya and Minoru Kawasaki. Their careers sort of start right there. They really kick off. Calamari Wrestler, Rego. They start, and you see a trajectory of these movies sort of springing up, and that influences more people who make low budget stuff, and you get really bizarre stuff. They're willing to push the limits, and also they don't have the means to do everything as polished as the big budget stuff that was coming before. So beyond just we're reviewing kind of trashier stuff this season. I do want to kind of explore the narrative that, these, to tie it into the conversation we were having, this is sort of the rise of fan films made as real films. These are, like, by definition, fans, genre fans, who started making movies, and you can see they don't have the traditional background. They start making really, really weird stuff, and it kind of falls apart. But within that, you see they kind of acquire style, and some stuff like Big Man Japan is one I'm really looking forward to reviewing, which I haven't seen a whole lot of other podcasts talk about, and I'm really excited to get into that. And you have people like that. I can't remember his first name, Matsumoto something. But people like that who only create like one entry, and it's really unique, and it's not replicated before or since.
Takashi Matsumoto, Jellyfish Eyes director. Is that right?
I don't think so. I think that's a different director who. You might be right about the Jellyfish Eyes, but as far as Big Man Japan, let me see.
The director, Takeshi Murakami. That's who I was thinking of. Murakami.
Sorry, my keyboard's messing up. Hitoshi Matsumoto. That's his name. But really kind of eclectic people like that who just spring up and create a giant monster movie. And I think the environment in which it was made was created by this gulch between big budget stuff. That we kind of take for granted, because the world at large, I think, sees giant monster movies, especially the ones made prior to the 2010s, as like just kind of cheap, schlocky movies with guys in costumes and, half-baked plots and bad acting, which can be true. But as soon as you see the independent people start trying to make their own, you realize that, like, all of the people making the big Godzilla movies, the big Gamera movies, those were all extremely talented people, and people who had been working years to like hone what they were doing. And that's just sort of what we're going to try to explore with season 2. And then, it continues into, we're going to review Zillafoot.
Oh no.
So we're going to branch
That'll be
out.
something.
It will. We've already seen part of it.
Just part.
Keep it that way.
It was your part, or I don't know if you came back in the end. We'll see.
You saw fat me.
Bringing
Same
an
room,
American
though.
touch to the giant monster genre.
That's what Zillafoot is.
Yeah, that's basically what I want. It's more of a promotion than a discussion point, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's what's coming down the pipeline with us.
Yeah, and I think that's something, as like I said, as time is going on, I see a lot more people doing, and I think it's very nice to see people taking, and especially the indie stuff, and taking it seriously. I'm kind of biased because I'm like trying to do that as like a side career, legitimately, with working with SRS. That's something that now 2 releases, soon to be 3 Japanese films I'm like really pushing is taking the film seriously and not laughing at them as many people would. And I think that's
I was just going to say that's that's something you and I have talked about in the past, how there's just this complete disregard for these movies. And that's what we kind of try to do, is hopefully at least take it seriously enough to give people a new perspective on some films.
Right. And, I think, honestly, it's what we're doing. And when I say we, I'm including all of us here. What we're doing is what people did with Godzilla back 20 years ago. 20 years ago, oh, Godzilla, that's the giant dinosaur suit guy destroying the cardboard buildings. That was what Godzilla was. Godzilla is still that to a typical audience member to a certain extent today. But Godzilla is also a meaning, a metaphor, a message. He's the most destructive weapon on Earth. And there is a level of seriousness that comes with the Godzilla name, the Godzilla brand. And that's because of the work that people have done. In 20 years, you have your Steve Rifles, your Ed Gottscheskis, your David Khaleds, Stuart Galbraiths the Fourths, stuff like that. Those guys who took the Godzilla film seriously and really provided defense for why they should be respected. And that's been done primarily with the Showa films, not so much anything post Showa, unless you're GMK. But I think seeing people attempt to contextualize and defend your indie kaiju films especially is important, and there's a definite need for that in the space of the fandom and giant monster cinema.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to get people's hopes up. I don't know how much defending we're going to be doing of these. But it is. I mean, the core of our show, which if anybody's listened to our show, you're probably thinking like you guys are going to be very cruel. And maybe that's not too far from the truth. But I'd like to preface it with the fact that the behind the scenes is sort of telling its own narrative, and the creation of these movies is sort of emblematic of something that was going on between people who were Godzilla fans, who were Gamera fans at the time, and now are sort of I don't know if you want to call it a relic or what, but we still have people. We still have Shinpei Hayashida making movies. We still have indie giant monster parody movies, stuff like Yuzo coming out, and it's all really rooted in this 10-year gap, or 12-year gap, depending on how you want to split it up. But that is interesting to me because you guys have done good work in finding new angles to look at movies in, like Gamer versus Gaios. I really enjoyed that episode. I think a lot of people have. And you guys provided a good angle or, insight into what makes that movie more interesting, not just by talking about what's in the movie, but by what's around the movie. You made it more interesting. And as far as Godzilla movies go, I think most of the information out there is pretty well documented. To the point that between people like us, and I'm on the lower end of that, I don't know everything, but guys like you probably know most of the behind the scenes info for a lot of big giant monster movies like that. And for me, why I think it's important that we do, research this time. I'm actually doing research, and I'm going to do introductions and outroductions for all these movies, sort of like, TCM or something, which we've done on our other show, Only in Amityville, but I'm bringing that here and putting more of an emphasis on it because that is like sort of a knowledge gap that I have in my mind and something that I don't hear people talking about a lot. Off the top of my head, hearing about Shinpei Hayashida being approached by a company that wanted him to create a giant monster movie, and that's sort of how Rego came about. I didn't know that. I just figured he wanted to make a giant monster movie, and after he made his Godzilla parody and his Gamera fan film, I figured he wanted to do that, but he was actually prompted to do that, and that was interesting to me. And so I want to find stuff like that and explore that more thoroughly to give sort of a background for some of these movies, like Big Man Japan. You know, Big Man Japan, it's easy for us to see that, and it's like, okay, it's a weird movie with like CG monsters, and it's like a real dry comedy and kind of unique, and it went to some festivals, but it's like not many American fans would know that was it Hitoshi? Yeah,
Mhm.
Hitoshi Matsumoto is a really, really big comedian in Japan, and he's going through like a very public kind of scandal, if you want to call it that right now. And it's interesting why he made Big Man Japan because he put out a short film that went to television, and then regulations got tighter, and he decided that he wasn't free enough in that medium to explore it any further, and that's why he went to feature films, and he decided to make his first one a giant monster movie. That's interesting to me, and I don't think that's common knowledge. So stuff like that is kind of the driving force behind what we're trying to do with season 2. And as far as the criticism that like our normal, like we're going to watch the movie and we're going to break down like why it looks like this or what happened, or like, hey, that actually wasn't bad. That is going to be pretty much the exact same as we've been doing. So if it is a bad movie, we're not going to act like it's great because there's some interesting behind the scenes trivia. Although we are going to acknowledge that, we're still, our criticism is going to be the same. So it's sort of a transformation that we're going through, but I think it's just going to make the same show work better, I think. But my main worry is I don't know how many people are going to be clicking on these episodes as opposed to the usual episodes that we've been putting out, Godzilla movies, Ultraman stuff.
That's fair. Yeah, that's definitely something that I think audiences still haven't entirely jumped on the indie train, but it is coming. That is something that people are doing.
I mean, that's just the risk you take when you're covering indie projects, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are interested, some aren't. For us, we just like to see if we can bring a new audience, even if it's just one person, you know?
Yeah, I'm hoping that, because our goal is to be around for a while. I don't know if you want to go into that, but there's there used to be a lot more of us, if you want to put it that way. There used to be a lot more Godzilla giant monster podcasters. Around 2020 there was a boom, and we got real big for a second, and now we're kind of down to a few of us again. And I'd like, for your, like, let's say like 8 years from now, or maybe a little sooner, 6 years from now, somebody watches Riga or something, and for whatever reason they want to learn more about it, or they want to hear somebody else's review, and they look it up, and our podcast is one of the first that comes up, and they can actually like have more of a context. I don't want to say like, I want them to learn something, because we're not educational, but if we can give them a little more context beyond just a superficial, like, this movie looks bad and it kind of sucks, and we didn't like it very much, the end, goodbye. If we can add a little more to that and make our reviews kind of stand out and stand the test of time, then I think we will have succeeded. And I think that's something that you guys have done a really good job with. I've used Calamari Wrestler, Death Kappa. I've used those reviews as part of my research, is like listening to the way that people discuss them, or like, because those are by far the most in-depth reviews that I've heard about those movies. Of course, until my episodes come out.
That's right. Yeah, it's Rex. Maybe you want to jump in here, but the Rex and I do I think a pretty decent job at. Every movie is somebody's first movie, whether it be good or bad. And every movie could introduce somebody into a whole new world. And I mean, we've experienced that, you know. When we say that, I immediately think of Rex when he first watched Ring. You know, he would only talk about Ring for 8 months.
What can I
Uh,
say? Good movie.
on our website, when we had to pick our top 5 movies of all time, Ring is one of Rex's top 5 movies.
It's one of the best movies I've seen, man. What can I say?
And you know, I think it's really nice that, you know, not only for maybe an audience member, but for us as the hosts, we get to learn and we get to experience and we get to enjoy uh new movies.
Right.
And it teaches us, you know, Rex and I watching these movies and breaking them down and going and reading the director's blog posts from 25 years ago about his breakup and how much he hates people, um, specifically a certain gender, and how, like,
Oh boy.
she cheated on him. It
Oh,
suddenly
boy.
makes sense why he's the director he is, and he's an awful person. But it was interesting.
I mean, not only that, but like, yeah, I'm studying film. I want to know more about film. I think all of us here have at least some amount of passion for film. And I feel like doing like kaiju conversation episodes on a lot of these movies has really changed the way I view these movies and just the lens I'm looking at them under. And I feel like that has contributed to just how I view movies in general as a whole has completely shifted from like what, like 2, 3 years ago when we did like Super Inframan.
Yeah, that was 3 years ago.
Oh god.
No, that was 4. Was that 2020? No, it was
Oh dear
2021.
god.
Was it?
I don't
I,
know. I hope it was not 2020.
I'm not well versed in kaiju conversation lore. I just experienced
Nor am I.
it. I'll fact check real quick because that was 2020. 2020. That was 4 years
Jesus.
ago in November. 4 years since Rex and I like started this part of the KC journey.
Oh my god. Jesus.
4 more years.
Maybe.
Hell
Who
yeah.
knows? If we can get through episode 100, then maybe. There's a joke in there that only Rex and I
Oh, boy.
know.
Oh boy.
I've been waiting for it.
There's anticipation.
It'll come out. It'll come out.
Eventually.
It'll be out when it's out.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. God, 75 episodes because we started at 2076.
At what?
76. Rex and I have done 76 episodes almost together. Probably closer to 70. Yeah, no, like just the and actually before that tangent, I want to go back to what you brought up about how there was many of us and now there's few of us. I think that has been something that, at least for me, it's not necessarily been a good thing, because as people continue to go on hiatuses, you know, end their shows, give up, fall in quality, be
Keep going.
Nathan Marchand.
Whatever's happening with Nathan Marchand. Whatever you want to call that.
Joke. That's a joke. He
It
knows
is a
I'm
joke. It is a
joking.
joke. It is a joke.
To me, there's a level of like, okay, as people continue to drop, that means I have to do better. You know, there's only probably, I would say now there's probably about a dozen regular kaiju podcasts. I feel like that's a fair assessment.
And only 2 are worth listening to.
One of them present.
We'll leave it a mystery.
Which
one?
But because there is only like roughly 12 regular shows now, each one of those brings their own qualities. And I think there's space for those shows, and I think it's fun to see those shows grow and continue to thrive in what they do. Some of them have built their own little fan circles. Some of them have continued to prove that kaiju fans know a lot. Some of them have proved that you don't have to know a lot. Some of them have been very creative with their approaches to the medium. And I think that is something that's really special. And it's nice to see, as it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, it's nice to see who's still around, but it's also stressful for me. It's like, okay, I have to do better. When people go to look up Shin Kamen Rider podcast, there's not going to be a lot of Shin Kamen Rider podcasts. I have to do really good, at least on my end. I'm not going to speak for Rex here, but like, there is a level of pressure I put on myself that's like, we have to do good. Not only for my own personal, goals, aspirations, and values, but for the listeners. That's something that's important to me, is that they get something out of it. So yeah, it's been very interesting to see from 2020, when we had 3-4 dozen shows announce and do a couple episodes, to now where it's like there's probably about a dozen regular shows that are still uploading to this day.
And you were saying you were going to do a live ranking of all of those shows right now. Is that correct?
I don't think I'm qualified to do that. I would put
Kaiju Conversation F tier.
Kaiju Transmissions as S tier. Giant Monster BS is S tier.
Of course.
The Godzilla podcast is S tier. Kaiju versus History at S tier. Tokyo Lives as S tier. I'm genuinely like blanking on like regular shows that I know upload.
No, that's just all the Kaiju podcasts out there,
I'm not
There's
I'm
one
not
glaring omission. The Something Island Something Vault.
Never heard of it.
I'm struggling. This is why I don't have time to listen to podcasts. Actually, I'm thinking about listening to an audiobook about the history of Japan. I think that might end up filling my earlobes for the vast majority of my listening, what I'm listening to. Godzilla Destroy All podcast, that's an S tier. That's an S tier. It looks like G-Force, a Kaiju podcast, is posting S tier. Kaiju Kingdom podcast, that's an S tier. Podzilla's an S tier. On Monster Island, that's an S tier.
This is a terrible ranking.
No Gods, No Monsters is an S tier.
Where's the drama in this ranking? Where's the T?
Monster Movie Funtime Goes, an S tier podcast. The Monster Island Film Vault. I forgot that's a show that exists.
Going in A.
That's gonna go to F. It's F tier.
this would be interesting if your nose could grow like Pinocchio. This would be interesting to watch.
But nobody will know which ones I've actually listened to and which ones I.
Which ones you're making up with a AI generator right now?
Henshin Power of the Film Vault. That's an S tier one. That's a real one. It exists.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rex, did you want to add anything into the whole, not necessarily my philosophy on podcasting, but on yours?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you brought up how like you sort of strive to like really do your best to bring an entertaining and informative episode. And yeah, that's kind of my goal, is just I hope to bring like a slightly new perspective and make someone like just look at a film a different way. I think I fully believe in open discussions, whether or not you agree or disagree with someone. I feel like it's very important to just discuss how you feel, why you feel about that, and even with something as seemingly silly of a topic as kaiju movies, there's a lot of disregard for these kinds of films that I feel like has gotten in the way of serious discussions and has allowed some really interesting things to just be completely overlooked. And so, where that's possible, I hope that I spot those, or you spot those, and we, bring them up and bring a new eye to them, I suppose.
That is something I think is very important. And that is, at the end of the day, as a podcaster and streamer, I feel like one of the best end goals is to keep the conversation going.
Right. And I mean, this is an audio format about listening to people. What's kind of the point if you're not bringing anything new to the table?
Mm-hmm. Life's too short to not talk big, right? Have those conversations. Like literally have those big conversations. Talk. As somebody who went through the 10-year gap, talking, going back to Godzilla, the only thing that kept the franchise going was the conversation. The kaiju fans having those conversations and keeping the dream alive, and not letting it die. That's something I think as time goes on, we do see. It's like Universal Monsters. Those characters those characters do not have conversations going. It's an echo chamber when there is, and there's not a lot going on. Now, they are 90 years old, so it's like you got to give it a bit of a break, but it's important to keep those conversations going and being very very
Excuse my co-host.
um
Today he's more like a go-host.
keeping, the Universal Monsters don't have that healthy conversation going. They're very much tame now, and that's something I don't want kaiju and tokusatsu and giant monsters to ever have.
I mean, tokusatsu is kind of at an advantage in that regard with like new conversations, because since it's a foreign property and a lot of the information has largely been exclusive to Japan for so long, and there is still tons and tons of information that is just not translated. Like, I'm still waiting for the day the Godzilla completion books get translated into English by someone. And there's just a whole new like wealth of Godzilla knowledge. And so yeah, I think things like that, on top of like the fact that obviously we're getting new Godzilla movies every few years, is what keeps that alive. Compared to Universal Monsters, which is an English franchise where a lot of the information is already well and truly available in the present day, and not a lot new can really come out.
I won't take this slander of the Frankenstein fandom going on here. There are lots of big, important conversations going on about these beloved characters.
You know what? Fair
But
enough.
No, I see what you guys are saying. Yeah, it's something we're hoping to explore a little bit with these episodes, especially that 10-year break, because it was you're kind of seeing people put stresses put upon people. I don't know if you could have gotten a movie like Monster X Strikes Back while Godzilla and Gamera movies were coming out, really. I think that's interesting to me, is seeing movies as reaction to lack of movies, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's I heard this when I watched the Sharksploitation doc recently. And in it, they made the point to say, like, once you've done something, like, and you've covered it, what do? You make a parody of it. You turn it into a joke. The Jaws franchise alone did that. As it went from Jaws to Jaws 2 to Jaws 3D to Jaws the Revenge. And you see that, like, in the kaiju genre, with Death Kappa, Big Man Japan, Raiga, specifically Raiga, and Monster X Strikes Back. But some of them also are very intelligent. Monster X Strikes Back being one of those films. Something that when I initially watched it back when I was young, like, I didn't pick up on that. That was one of those films where rewatching it, suddenly it was like, wait a minute, this film's actually a lot smarter than I remember.
Was a legitimately pleasant surprise for me.
And being able to have those films, and especially like going back to them, and those films have been available. Monster X Strikes Back has been available in the States for over 10 years now. And the fact that it took me over 10 years to realize, hey, this is actually a pretty decent commentary on the political atmosphere of the time, I think is really interesting. And the fact that it was still relevant, 10 years later, I thought that was a nice surprise.
Yeah. And no, I think it's just unfortunate that films like Monster X Strikes Back often aren't given that chance. The most it gets is, it's the supreme leader of North Korea showing up. Oh my God, isn't this movie wacky?
Yeah, and that's something that I think a lot of people kind of stereotype Japanese films. It's like, oh, they're wacky, they're weird.
Oh yeah.
I know, as somebody who has continued to watch Japanese films and has no interest in stopping that anytime soon. In fact, I feel like I just buy more every day. It's not as weird as I used to think it was. It's really tame. Maybe I'm just Maybe
the thing is, there's just this general like current image of Japan as this weird, wacky place where all the weird sort of nerd things are, and there's a weird, almost fetishization of Japan in the current era that I've noticed.
Now, Minoru Kawasaki is not helping Japan beat these allegations. I think we should say. I'll be the first one to speak up. But yeah, it's interesting the way that I heard, I think it was Shinpei Hayashia talking about it in an interview, where he was, I think, making the third, I think it was God Raiga versus King Oga, and he was saying like Japanese fans do not want comedic kaiju movies. Like he was like they do not succeed. Like Japanese audiences want like serious giant monster movies. And it was really funny because he's wearing like this brightly colored Hawaiian shirt and he's like holding like stuffed animals and he's in the middle of making like a terrible comedy kaiju movie. But it's interesting that he's like, no, I know they don't want this, and he's continuing to make it. And those personalities are so strong. It's another thing I want to kind of put a spotlight on, is how those people like him and Minoru Kawasaki have such strong personalities that they stick out through these movies. And of course, we only know about them because they're attached to giant monster stuff. We don't necessarily know them because they're like experimental or whatever comedic indie directors. We know them because they're attached to giant monsters, which is attached to something that we like. So it's cool that that this interest sort of leads down rabbit holes like that sometimes. And a lot of those movies are weird, but like you said, there are some like Rago or
Jellyfish Eyes.
Jellyfish Eyes is pretty sincere. Also kind of wacky. But it's hard to comment on a lot of them because I haven't seen them, and the ones I have seen are very much the stereotypical kind of kaiju stuff.
Giant Teacher doesn't really, it's tongue in cheek, but its tongue is very firmly in its cheek.
Mm-hmm. Big Man Japan is kind of dry. Yes, Howl from Beyond the Fog. Yes, that's a great example. But there is some more sincere stuff in there that is setting out to achieve maybe not more, but just different things, more traditional kind of storytelling stuff.
Now, another thing, speaking of Japan and Japanese stuff that we all share in common is we all study Japanese.
We do.
I need to get back on that soon.
I've been trying to ramp up my learning a little bit more. Watashi, I'm trying to think. Watashi wa Nihongo o semasu.
Thank you.
Rex is laughing.
Arigato. Yeah, I've my studies, through thick and thin, I've maintained my Duolingo streak. I'm at 700 something days now. But there have been some really dark periods there. Days when I'm redoing my 1, 2, 3s just to keep that streak going. I'm not really learning anything. But I know Ichi-ni-san like the back of my hand now. But I am
Roku Nana Hachi.
I mean, if you've been doing Duolingo for 700 days, I'd hope you know Ichi-ni-san by the back of your hand.
Well, no need to hope. It's true. Speaking of countries, Rex, is it true you're Australian, or are you just doing a voice? What's going on here?
I do, in fact, believe I am currently situated in Australia. I look outside and it looks like Australia to me, not gonna lie.
Are there some bugs out there?
Oh, yes, plenty. Probably some in this house, unfortunately.
Oh. How big is the biggest spider you've ever seen?
Well, Well, I've had some in my shower, like the bigger than my hand. So
Oh my god! I was
Yeah, not
talking to
fun.
Matt about it. I could not do
It's like
that.
I'll walk in the shower sometimes, and the shower will be on. I'll be naked, and I'll just be going to like grab like the soap, and behind it is just this massive spider.
Ugh,
Not fun.
that's crazy. That's crazy that that's not just a rumor. Um, I saw a video the other day of people walking around at night, and there's like a little puddle, and there's like some like disgusting looking fish creature in there, and it's like that's just Australia apparently. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but they like poke it with a stick, and it like bites the stick really hard. And it's like, just if you weren't looking down, you would have stepped on that thing. Props to Australia.
And it is a chill country to live in, outside of the fact it's not chilly enough. It's too goddamn hot.
I was saying that we need to that the United States, Australia, and Ireland needs to team up and
What, team up
annex.
against the British?
Yes, we
Oh,
need to go
I
ahead and get
agree.
rid of them.
Just wipe it off the map, honestly.
Just annex. That'll be New Louisiana.
I mean, why stop at
Give
America
that
and
to
Ireland?
Louisiana.
Take everyone else that's been invaded by Britain.
Mhm.
It's all World War III against the Brits.
Go ahead, get Canada in there. Get Mexico. They're pretty chill. They don't have a whole lot to do with Britain, but they'd be game.
Hey, I think everyone has a reason to not like the British.
They're so small. Why can't we just get rid of them? They're tiny.
Elijah, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh no, no comment.
You don't want
Better
to
stand up
invade
for
the
that.
British?
You better stand up for the anthem, boy. It's down. We're down to it. It's us against them, Elijah.
I will watch from afar.
Oh, come on.
Aww.
We beat them with nothing but a little help from the French in the 1700s. We can do it again easy.
I mean, I lost to a bunch of emus, so I can't comment.
This is true.
If we can get the emus on our side, though,
You know what? That's a great point.
if we could ride them into battle, those British people, what remains of their teeth will fall out of their head because they're shivering so much. And we will conquer them, give them a taste of their own medicine. Elijah, what is going on in your head during all of this?
I'm thinking about where I went wrong.
Well, that's where you want to be, I think that's a great point to be at in this conversation,
But back to Alien Romulus.
Oh, it sucked.
There we go. He took it.
It was awful. I hated it. I actually was so sad. Yeah. I was so sad.
Give me a ranking of the Alien movies really quick, excluding the Predator crossovers.
Okay. At the bottom. No, I'll go top to bottom, actually.
Yeah.
Aliens, Alien Free, Covenant and Prometheus. I haven't seen in a long time, and I've only seen them once. But they'd probably go like below Alien Free, then Resurrection, then Romulus.
Okay, so you're putting Covenant above Resurrection and Romulus?
Yes.
I remember Covenant was the last one I saw, and I really, really hated it.
See, I don't know. I'd have to rewatch it. I didn't mind it when I saw it, but Yeah. I don't know. I need to rewatch it. I might end up rewatching Prometheus later today, in all honesty.
Prometheus is kind of nice as its own standalone thing, in my opinion. I don't like that they course corrected really hard and tried to make a sequel to Prometheus that was a straight up alien prequel
Right.
thing. That to me, it's I don't know. It seems like they gave in, and it was just really forgettable.
But for what it's worth, I feel like at least with Prometheus and Covenant, Ridley was at least trying to do something new with those movies. Like whether or not he succeeded is a whole other thing, but he was trying to do something new, unlike Alien Romulus, which is just a highlights reel of the franchise. Except
He does
everything's done
not-
less.
He does not like Romulus, in case you
I hated it. I was so sad.
He's
I was
strong.
so sad.
He strongly dislikes it.
I believe it. Have you? What are your thoughts on Alien Isolation?
Oh, I love that game. I was actually playing a little bit of it last night. Like I reinstalled it. Just
That was last night. Oh,
Yes.
that's funky.
I
That
value
was
your
this
opinion
morning.
very highly now because it seems like you have a firm grasp on the Alien series.
Yeah.
So I trust you when you say that Romulus is bad. I
Now,
probably
if-
wasn't going to see it anyway, but
It's the
forget
kind
about
of
it.
movie that I think a lot of people aren't going to mind it, and they're actually going to enjoy it. But to me, it was just the nostalgia porn is just, as I said before, it's just emblematic of everything I don't like in current Hollywood trends.
Mhm.
And that is what really broke my heart. And then also there's I don't want to spoil things, but there's a deep fake of a dead actor, and I don't like that.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So yeah. What a
That's
movie.
terrible. It's amazing how, I love Alien and I love Aliens, but my respect for the people who directed those movies has sharply declined in recent years.
Honestly, Ridley Scott's too funny in interviews for me to not love him.
He seems so miserable to me.
he's a very sad.
It's also like how do you why is Francis Coppola scrounging up money? Like he's spending his personal savings on making one more movie, and Ridley Scott's putting out like 5 movies every year and they all suck. Like nobody's going to watch them. They're all 8 hours long. Like how is this happening? I don't understand. I mean, I guess he was attached to some pretty big stuff, but I mean, to me it's still confusing. And he seems so grouchy.
Yeah, but that's what makes him funny, though. That's what makes him entertaining in interviews.
I guess I'm more of a Del Toro guy.
I mean, fair. Love Del Toro as well.
If Guillermo del Toro made nothing but terrible movies from here on out, I would die defending him. He's a saint. Which
Honestly,
he wouldn't. He only makes bangers.
Literally.
I forgot that Ridley Scott directed G.I. Jane.
He did.
Yes.
I've been saying since the
Day,
incident.
I suppose.
I've been saying since the incident, G.I. Jane 2 Chris Rock needs to get G.I. Jane 2 off the ground, and that he'll
That'd be
win.
a box office hit.
Well, keep in mind Scott did Gladiator, and now he's doing Gladiator 2. So
Will it be good though?
Ridley Snot.
very interesting. Ridley Scott's filmography is dubious at best. I'd say.
Yeah.
Oh god, I forget he did a Hannibal Lecter movie. Oh my god.
Have you guys seen the clip from I think it was House of Gucci that where Jared Leto honks like a car?
No.
No.
It's like a scene transition. He's really upset and he's in this makeup, he looks like the Penguin, and he's like, and he opens his mouth and a car horn comes out. And then they cut to a shot of like a parked car. But it's like the funniest, like, why did you think that would work? It just
I don't
looks
know.
like you're little honks.
I don't know. I just remember watching Napoleon in the theaters and being quite confused by just what was happening.
Yeah, I'm not.
There's something Scott says in an interview for The Last Duel that I thought was hilarious. It's like he gets very angry at an interview question.
Oh, wasn't the interviewer like backhand compliments him or something?
Yeah, he says something more realistic than Kingdom of Heaven or Robin Hood if we're talking about your films.
And he's like, "Oh, hang on a minute.
Thank you. You can, yeah, yeah. He did not appreciate that.
No, that's my
told that his
favorite Ridley Scott clip. That's hilarious.
We got Acno Goji in the chat.
Yo.
Yeah, Ridley Scott's not that cool. Neither is Jim Cameron. But you want to know
They
who
made
is
Alien
cool?
and Aliens, so at least Ridley's cool in my book. He's funny. Cameron would be cooler if he stopped using AI in 4Ks. That'd be nice.
But he has teams that work with him. He oversees every single
Allegedly.
He oversees every single transfer.
He takes a glance and that's about it, I'm sure.
He oversees every AI monstrosity background character that appears, and he says, this was always there in my head. I just couldn't get it across.
This is exactly what I wanted Aliens to look like. I wanted Vasquez's mouth to be deforming into a left cheek.
Mm-hmm. We wanted creepypasta background characters made out of beloved characters.
Exactly.
Is Spielberg the only
the vision.
person? Is Spielberg the only person left out of that like new wave of Hollywood blockbuster directors that's still not washed up? Is Spielberg? Would you define Spielberg as washed up? I would not.
Me? I mean,
I haven't seen enough of his recent films to really comment.
I love The Fabelmans, so
his best days are undeniably behind him, which I guess isn't saying much. He's pretty old. As far as those guys seem to go, he's certainly, I would call Ridley Scott washed up. I'd call him and James Cameron washed up. Spielberg, nah, he's all right. He's still
Lucas,
yeah, he's washed up. Lucas washed up in about 1979. Yeah, Lucas. Coppola, you could call him washed up.
Scorsese, I hear, is, but also isn't at the same time.
Oh, Scorsese's absolutely not washed up. Scorsese's making some of the best movies of his entire career. Have you seen? Are you guys Scorsese fans?
I have not watched the Scorsese film.
I want to. I've been meaning to.
Guys,
I wanted to see Killers of the Flower Moon.
Fellas,
that looked good, but I didn't see it.
They're incredible. He is the best living director right now, like bar none. Like I believe that with my whole heart. Like that is a generational, like, Kurosawa level, Hitchcock level, Kubrick level. I'd put him above Spielberg. Spielberg's made some great movies. I'm not denying that, but Scorsese is like a once in a lifetime talent. And it's the more I realize, I saw The Irishman and I was like, wow, that was really good, and then I went into theaters, saw Killers of the Flower Moon, and I was like, hold on a second. Like, the guy who made Goodfellas is alive at the same time that I am. Like, that is like mind blowing. He's such a talented guy. And I'm not trying to take away from anybody else. There's a lot of great people still working. But Scorsese is like, he has a body of work comparable to Hitchcock or Kurosawa or Kubrick, like any of the big guys. And the fact that he's still alive and making movies is like incredible. But he is getting pretty up there. Rex, are you in the jungle?
What? Oh my god, can you hear the birds? God damn it. God damn it.
So, honestly, the only Scorsese film I've even remotely been interested in until Killers of the Flower Moon is probably Silence.
Is it because Tsukamoto's in it? God damn it.
Hey, if you have one of my favorite directors of all time in a movie, you win.
Fair enough.
Silence is so incredible. I saw that I was working at a movie theater at the time, and it only came to theaters for 2 days. And it was like they didn't promote it at all. It just came out, and it was me, my sister, and then a group of like it was like some kind of like church group field trip went to see it. And if you've seen the movie, it's like that's kind of a brutal one. Like I think they were thinking it was going to be some kind of like God's Not Dead, you know, like Christian movie. That is a brutal movie. You would like Silence. You would like it just because it's like it's steeped in Japanese culture and history. And I think they went through pretty great lengths to make sure that was like pretty accurate. But phenomenal performances. He's so good. Goodfellas. Akno Goji 2001 is correct when he says, I love Goodfellas. Everybody should love Goodfellas. To me, that is, people talk about The Godfather as being like the greatest like mafia movie or like gangster movie, crime family movie. Goodfellas is like, wow, it's so incredible. All of his stuff, you know, After Hours, great, like even down to like the movies that aren't really talked about that much. I could go on about Scorsese for a while, but he's got nothing to do with Godzilla. Although he mentioned Godzilla in his what's her name, Fran Lebowitz documentary that he made on Netflix.
Did he?
They mentioned Godzilla, yeah, and Ishiro Honda.
Ironically, the only reason I didn't see Killers of the Flower Moon because I was invited to see it by a friend, but I wanted to attend the premiere of Monarch Episode 1.
You chose poorly, Rex.
Okay, it is Scorsese, so maybe I did actually.
I hope he continues to make movies. I mean, it's incredible. It's just incredible that he's making movies. I mean, especially you need somebody like Ridley Scott for perspective, where it's like, oh, Grandpa got the camera again. Let's see what he made. Oh, Jared Leto's honking like a car. All right. And then you see Scorsese making a 3-hour masterpiece. I mean, any other director, like if Adam Wingard made Killers of the Flower Moon, which he could never make, that would define his career. That would be the quintessential Adam Wingard movie of his whole career. Nothing would even come close. And for Scorsese, that's a footnote. That's like an afterthought. That's what he's made after he's made all of his masterpieces. It's crazy. Sorry, went right back to Scorsese.
Interesting. Maybe one day I'll watch Scorsese. I gotta watch David Lynch.
I'll
first.
get around to it. You need
Lynch
to watch
is great.
Eraserhead.
Outside of
You would love
Dune, I
it.
need to watch something that's not Dune.
You would love Eraserhead.
I keep hearing that.
You might like Lost Highway. Maybe.
He's only directed like what, 10 movies?
It's not a whole lot, yeah.
Probably about like 12 or so.
It is 10. I'm looking at his filmography.
Oh, damn.
And you know, if I'm watching 27 Zatoichi movies by the end of this, I should be able to find a way to watch 10 David Lynch. I've already seen one, so it's 9. 9 David Lynch movies.
I think I've been saying for a while, you need to do we need to do a Hitchcock watch along.
Oh yeah.
I'll curate a selection of Hitchcock movies, give you the cliff notes of his career. You've got to broaden your horizons. Japanese cinema is great, but there's been some of the best directors of all time are not Japanese.
This is true.
And
I've been trying to tell him this for so long.
it would be interesting to hear, I was kind of taken aback by your reaction to 2001: A Space Odyssey, but
god awful.
could be an anomaly. Let's see, have you seen any other Kubrick movies?
No, that turned me off from Kubrick.
You haven't seen The Shining?
No.
What? That's usually everybody's first. You've got to see Full Metal Jacket. You've got to see Full Metal Jacket. It's nothing like 2001. Put that out of your mind. That's incredible. One of the best movies ever made. I rewatched that not too long ago. I was like, wow. Forgot, after a while they just turn into movies on your shelf and you forget how powerful some of them can be. But yes, I'll do a Lynch watch along with you, whatever you want to do.
I will say this: I do want to watch Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
I got to see that in theaters as a Fathom event in high school. It's very, very, very cool.
Damn.
I used that title as a joke once for Godzilla King of the Monsters. I put Dr. Serizawa or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
Oh boy. Clever.
It's very clever. when you're a Godzilla movie and you use a nuke as a good thing, it's very un-Godzilla.
It was a decision.
Blowing up a nuclear bomb in front of Godzilla's head is really sick. Really clever.
They really did. They really went out of their way to make some new ideas with that movie.
Mm-hmm.
Not counteracting the franchise whatsoever in doing
what they did with the oxygen destroyer changed the game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that raised the bar. It's like every Godzilla movie before they introduced the oxygen destroyer like that is trash. You've got to try harder now.
Mm-hmm. Destroyer needs to be in the Monsterverse.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hell yeah.
But with that being said, I feel like we've done a pretty decent job here at having some conversations, diving into cinema and Giant Monster BS with Co.
To our first official collab on your podcast.
This is true. This is very true.
And hey, this is my first official time meeting you, Gratton. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I was actually pretty excited when you showed up. I was like, I'm getting the full Kaiju conversation experience. At some points, I felt like I was listening to an episode, living it. You could retitle this Kaiju Conversation episode 101, Alien Romulus, featuring Giant Monster BS.
Maybe.
Very cool. Very cool.
But we can, if you guys are good, I think we can wrap things up here before we get too off the rails in talking about Australia.
4 more hours. 4 more.
I don't know if I could do that again. I've done an 8-hour stream. It was exhausting.
I can imagine.
So we're going to wrap things up here. As we always love to do some shameless self-promotion, as some F-tier podcasts might suggest. But as we like to say it here, the most noblest of streaming traditions. And for once, it is not only I. So the way we're going to do this, Gratton, you are the guest. So you are going to start us off with the most noblest of streaming traditions.
Okay, I will try this, although I haven't rehearsed or anything. My name is Gratton Conwill. I co-host Giant Monster BS with my good friend Matt Fields, and we are coming up on season 2 of that. And if you like Giant Monster movies, there's a good chance we've probably reviewed most of the Giant Monster movies you've seen. So listen to that. Try not to leave us any 1-star reviews. We're actually full up on that. I don't think we can take any more. And if you like horror movies or Amityville movies, go check out Only in Amityville, which has now been running for 4 years, and listen to basically Giant Monster BS talk about horror movies. And then, if you like funny sketches about Alec Baldwin, maybe a gun's involved somewhere, I don't know, check out my YouTube channel, He's Passed, HESPASSED on YouTube. That is where I put all of my creative efforts into. Matt and I, again, we collaborate there. We make short, usually comedic films, but not all the time. And we've got a big project coming up. The biggest, most ambitious thing that either of us have done, and that's going to be exclusive to that channel. Please check it out. The end.
Rex, you are here, so you are next.
Well, dear viewers, you can find me on YouTube at RexZeno, on Twitter at Rex_Xenomorph, and on Instagram, Rex_Xeno. And if you want to check out some of my writing, go take a look at the Tokusatsu Network.
And as for me, hello, I am Elijah Thomas, and I don't need to link myself because I do that too much as is. So, with that, check out Kaiju Conversation on Spotify, iTunes, and any podcast platform you can imagine. Check us out on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram at Kaiju_Converse. Go to kaijuconversation.com to see all of our work and to see a list of upcoming Kaiju films. That is a new addition to the website, and it'll be an ever-growing list of upcoming Kaiju films. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for tuning into the VOD version once that is done. And thank you all so much for tuning in, for interacting, and for being a part of Kaiju Conversation Live. I'm your host, Elijah. And with that, there is one thing to remind everybody now, and that is, please remember, everybody, life's too short to not talk. Bye, guys.
Bye.